up to a third of the 15,000 Cherokee who were forced to make the journey died on the way, which is one reason that journey came to be known as the Trail of Tears.
Welcome to Watch Mojo. Today we're doing a deep dive into the United States' most regrettable actions in history.
Once moved below deck, enslaved people would find themselves stuffed into compartments with ceilings as low as 4.5 feet, where they would spend most of their voyage.
The Johnson-Reed Act. America is a country forged by immigrants, with only 1 to 3% of the population being natives in 2020. You would expect the nation to be more accepting, given that almost everyone there is either an immigrant or a descendant of one. Well, in reality, a majority of early Americans also brought prejudiced beliefs over to the colonies. Such sentiments caused the Immigration Act of 1924, enacted to ban Asian immigrants, ensuring only white Protestants could enter the country.
Then President Calvin Coolidge supported the law, saying America must be kept American.
It set a cap on yearly immigrants, only 165,000 per year. It codified racist immigration policy into U.S. law, blocking people from fleeing poverty, persecution, or even fascism in Europe and the rest of the world.
These laws were part of a broader trend of nativism and anti-immigrant sentiment in the U.S. during the 1920s. They reflected a desire to return to what was perceived as the more homogeneous population of earlier decades.
Invasion of Iraq.
My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
U.S. intelligence failed in the early 2000s, convincing George Bush that Saddam Hussein was hiding WMDs in Iraq. In approximately 5 weeks, a U.S.-led coalition captured Baghdad, beginning the Western occupation of Iraq. The war would only come to a true conclusion in 2011 when the U.S. finally withdrew. It wasn't the end of war in Iraq, though, with the region since being almost constantly torn apart by warfare. It was entirely based on false pretenses, which caused immense human suffering across decades.
There was no link between 9/11 and Iraq, so the Bush administration began manufacturing justifications.
An invasion of a sovereign nation without a genuine cause is a violation of international law, widely considered a war crime by many. It wasn't simply a strategic failure, it was a moral catastrophe.
It changed the entire Middle East. In fact, it changed much of our world forever.
MKUltra.
I was given a glass of Kool-Aid, and so were the other children. This Kool-Aid was spiked with LSD.
If possible, mind control would be one of the grossest violations of an individual's freedom. So you would expect America, once considered the leader of the free world, to be entirely opposed to it, right? Well, during the Cold War, the CIA was so desperate that they did extremely evil things to achieve it. This included them doing barbaric tests on unconsenting individuals, often leading to their deaths. Super hallucinogens were fed to subjects.
You know, what the CIA really dreamed of was sort of like a drug you could give to someone, get them to commit all sorts of unspeakable acts, and they wake up the next day and they don't remember what they've done.
They could also be electrocuted, sleep-deprived, and hypnotized. It blatantly violated basic human rights and U.S. laws, becoming a real-life horror story that spanned 2 decades behind closed doors.
Well, there's a lot I could not remember after I got out of the Allen. When my family came, I was a zombie. I didn't even know who they were.
McCarthyism.
Live TV coverage provides millions of Americans with their first sustained look at the crusading senator and his bare-knuckle methods.
During the peak of the Cold War, fear replaced freedom, paving the way for paranoia to hijack democracy. This was also known as the Red Scare, a period of intense anti-communist hysteria in America. People were accused of being communists or sympathizers with little to no evidence, which often destroyed entire lives.
I want to make it clear that the United States Army does not coddle communists. This committee knows that. The American people know that.
It was like the modern-day equivalent of the hysteria surrounding the Salem witch trials. You didn't need to be a communist to have your life ruined. Having a friend with left-wing views, or even just being slightly progressive, could prompt investigation. It was a betrayal of core American values such as the First Amendment, which took a real beating. Japanese internment camps. Generally, people associate prison camps with the Nazi regime or the Soviet Union. But America also had its share of concentration camps.
The Army provided fleets of vans to transport household belongings. and buses to move the people to assembly centers.
Starting in 1942, roughly 120,000 Japanese Americans were forcibly relocated into 10 separate camps. 2/3 of them were U.S. citizens, most second- and third-generation immigrants who had never lived in Japan. On the other hand, there were millions more Italian and German Americans, yet they suffered far less forced relocation. It was a mass violation of civil rights, entirely motivated by racism and wartime hysteria. It's one of many examples of American ideals being abandoned, all in the name of security. Well, the security of the elite, at least.
The Japanese-American experience of World War II left a scar on generations and in the soul of a nation.
Tuskegee syphilis study.
The great shame of the study is that the men thought that they were being treated.
Our next entry isn't just disturbing, it's one of the most horrifying and unethical experiments ever conducted on U.S. soil. The study specifically targeted African American men, supposedly in the name of science. In 1932, the U.S. Public Health Service began studying the lives of almost 400 African American men with syphilis. They were curious about what would happen if the disease was left untreated in return for free medical care. While they did get this, they also weren't told they had syphilis and were instead given no meaningful treatment for the ailment.
The men still didn't know they were sick, and they were not given penicillin. By then, more than 1/3 of the infected men had died.
By 1947, they could be given penicillin as treatment, but the study continued at full steam regardless. It only ended because of a press leak in 1972, after claiming over 100 victims.
In 1997, President Bill Clinton formally apologized to the victims of the study. The president's apology was a welcome first step.
Involvement in the Vietnam War.
After centuries of war in Vietnam, the one that began in 1955 would be internationally reported news and last for 20 years.
The Vietnam War began in 1955, following the nation gaining independence from France. It became split along the 17th parallel, with the North being ruled by the Communists and the South by capitalists. Major support for Ho Chi Minh in the North caught America's attention, who at the time were terrified of communism. It prompted them to have the South's leader killed in a coup, followed by a full-blown occupation by American forces.
We have made a national pledge to help South Vietnam defend its independence, and I intend to keep that promise.
It lasted until the mid-70s, with America committing disgusting atrocities to achieve victory. The most famous was My Lai, when U.S. soldiers massacred hundreds of civilians in a tiny village for the simple crime of being Vietnamese.
It's going to be a free-for-all. You can shoot anything you want, anything that moves, as long as he's not one of your own.
Dropping the bomb.
American scientists had always known the bomb would produce radiation, but the scale of the after effects came as a shocking surprise.
While no one will refute the claim that Imperial Japan was egregiously evil, it's commonly said not to fight fire with fire. It was the first and only time nuclear weapons have been used in war, with most of the dead being civilians. It wasn't a simple case of just dying on impact. They turned 2 cities into literal hell, with many later perishing from radiation sickness and cancer.
Then came something that would forever change perception of the bomb.
The government claimed they were necessary, but many historians refute this idea since Japan was ready to surrender. It was more about intimidating the Soviets than defeating Japan, which was already under severe conditions by that point. Native American genocide. Before European colonization, America was a vibrant and diverse continent, home to millions of native peoples. Estimates say their population dropped 96% between 1492 and 1900, representing a genocide of an almost entire continent. It was done because of greed, power, and white supremacy. For a long time, the American elites sought to entirely erase their cultures from the planet. Native children were forced into boarding schools, treaties were broken, and constant wars were waged to steal land. One of the most infamous atrocities was the Trail of Tears, when almost 60,000 people from 5 tribes were forcibly kicked out of their homes and relocated to designated territory in the West.
Up to 1/3 of the 15,000 Cherokee who were forced to make the journey died on the way, which is one reason that journey came to be known as the Trail of Tears.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into Settings and switch on your notifications. The transatlantic slave trade.
Once moved below deck, enslaved people would find themselves stuffed into compartments with ceilings as low as 4.5 feet, where they would spend most of their voyage.
The triangle of trade was one of the most lucrative trades in human history. Europeans brought slaves from Africa to the Americas to live a life of harsh labor and exploitation, giving the Europeans immense wealth to bring home. It was easily one of the most morally corrupt chapters in human history, which built the foundations of America's economy and society. America's wealth was built off the backs of stolen Africans, who lived some of the worst existences imaginable. It was practiced in America for 250 years, longer than they've been a free country. Even though it ended in 1865, its shadow still lingers over America, meaning it wasn't just a crime against individuals, but against entire generations.
It really is a testament to the human spirit that African Americans were able to survive that system and ultimately to be able to do great things coming out of that system.
To end things on a more hopeful note, what do you think is the most life-affirming moment in American history? Let us know in the comments.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.